Africa is entering a new era with no single party securing an outright majority at national level, forcing politicians to negotiate for coalition partners. This has economists and investors worried about potential volatility as horse trading takes place behind the scenes. Pan-African Investment and Research Chief Economist Dr. Iraj Abedian joins us for more. Dr. Abedian, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Well, we have voted and now South Africans are waiting to see how our vote will shape the government nationally and provincially. And we know that uncertainty is damaging to the economy. We've already seen the rand do a bit of a wobbly, if you will. So let's talk about what do business leaders want to see? What is impacting the rate of the rand as we speak?
I think that we must separate the two issues that you raised, Hugo. One is what to do investor, what the business community wants, is predictability on the first and foremost, the stability within the socio-political environment, and very importantly, the emergence of a government that will focus on the immediate needs of the economy, which has been neglected, as we know, over the past 10, 15 years. So those are the obvious needs of a growing economy and a prosperous business community. The issue of rand, of course, does come into the picture, but it's not all about elections. It's also about some other technical issues. For example, we've had a major Anglo-American deal with billions of dollars, which now been put on ice. On the back of that, the rand was strengthening prior to the election over the past 3-4 weeks. That deal has been canned, and therefore the rand is also responding to that. But also, you're right, some of the weakening of the rand reflects the fact that the South African economy, its policy environment, and its politics is entering a new dispensation. And that dispensation has a lot more uncertainty and unpredictability than any one of us used to.
So now, on the horizon are the coalitions, and that's a prospect that hasn't worked too well in local government. Is part of this volatility that we're experiencing the uncertainty around will coalitions work at national level?
Absolutely, but it's not just about whether it will work, who will be around the table. There's a big difference between local government and national government in terms of the workability and the importance of coalitions. Remember back in 1994, we had a coalition government. ANC, IFP, at that time, NATS, they formed a very successful coalition government initially for the first few years, ensured political stability, managed the transition, and we saw the economic benefits followed relatively strongly in a short period of time. Now we have to also reflect on that type of coalition, a coalition that provides and projects national unity, projects the stability, project focus on the needs of the society, much as it was back in 1994 and thereabouts. So I think our democratic order needs a different type of leadership and a coalition that deals with a mature and maturing democracy as opposed to a democracy that was just born in 1994. So I believe we have all that it takes, and we should not, I'm saying it as an economist, we should not compare the governance of the national economy with the governance of a municipality or a metropolitan area.
Now, after the elections, we'll prepare for the first sitting of the National Assembly, where the president will be elected. Is Cyril Ramaphosa what the business community and investors are looking for, do you think?
I think the business community is not looking for any particular person. It requires much more than personality. Personalities are important, leaderships are critical, but it's not just an individual. President Ramaphosa, over the past 10 years, has been in the office, and we've had a lot of horrible things happening when he was deputy president. The past 5 years, he has made a lot of progress, got a lot of governance issues sorted out, but also he has left a lot to be desired. So it's not a question of him or anybody else. It's a question of what are the terms of coming to the office? What is the framework for the coalition in terms of their national and strategic goals that they set themselves and share with the nation? That will be a lot more important than individuals. Of course, President Ramaphosa has got a lot of credibility in the business community. He himself is a recognized businessman, and therefore that credibility is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. If he comes out the way he has been within the space of ANC over the past 5 years, that he hasn't been able to bring a lot of reform that the economy badly needs, then the business community will be disappointed. On the other hand, if his partnership is such that has got credibility of commitment to policy reforms, building the infrastructure, focusing on service delivery, and getting macroeconomic stability in place. And Hugo, it's very important to pay attention to the fact that South Africa has been downgraded, junk graded, cost of capital is high, grey listed. These are important immediate national priorities that a new government has to wrestle with and get it done. Is President Ramaphosa commits himself to that and puts timeline to it and become a lot more businessman-like than woolly and warm and fuzzy statements, then yes, the business community look forward to that.
Well, Dr. Abedian, you talk about credibility, and President Cyril Ramaphosa came into office with a lot of credibility as a sound businessman. But you'd be hard-pressed to compare South Africa's performance or the performance of South Africa's economy to his predecessors, who didn't have the same level of business pedigree. And then there's so much that happened under his watch in the last few years. And when we talk about sound governance, there were issues with Palapala Farm, for instance, which obviously do not speak to sound governance. So how important is credibility for the next president if it isn't Cyril Ramaphosa?
Absolutely. I fully agree with you that President Ramaphosa came to office with a lot of credibility, but unfortunately he squandered a lot of that credibility, not just with Palapala, but also with a lot of inaction. He did not commit crimes, but he omitted to do what the economy needs. Under his watch, we had Transnet dwindling. Under his watch, we had railways not being resuscitated. The economy's growth going to 0.5%. So I think these are pointing to the fact that whoever comes in, credibility and clean political and ethical morality is a requirement, but it's not sufficient. We need to have over and above an ethical governance, an ethical leader. We need to have the right people around in his cabinet. You cannot have a lot of compromised people in the cabinet, incompetent people, and hope that the president alone will just carry the can on the back of his or her credibility. We need to require ethical, credible starting point as a necessary condition, but as a sufficient condition is that around that president, around that credibility should be competence and committed ministers who will understand the momentous point at which they get into the cabinet, get in charge, and do what needs to be done with ethical commitment.
Dr. Abedian, it might be early days yet to talk about what that 100-day plan will look like for the new government or for the new president, if we do indeed have a new one. But let's talk about some of those key areas. Obviously, the issues around load shedding, they'd want to maintain that we don't have power cuts, as we've had over the last, in fact, the last 50-odd days. There've been no power cuts, so they would want to maintain that. What are some of the other things that would be on that point plan, whatever it looks like, around what do they need to achieve, what are their targets in that first 100-day period?
The 100 days absolute overriding strategic national interest requires a turnaround of the cabinet focus, government policy reforms that turns the economy from 0.5% growth to 4 to 5% growth. That means not only electricity reliability and sustainability, but also our ports, our railways, our water supplies, our urban infrastructure, and very importantly, a commitment to capacitate the government. We have not only state-owned enterprises have been hollowed out of the skills and capacity and proper management, but also government departments have been hollowed out. Competent people have been pushed out of the system and been replaced by incompetent people. You cannot deal with any economy's needs and society's public services when the public sector, government departments, and parastatals are not capacitated with the best required skills. So those would be, for me, the type of new 100-day objectives that government would have to put together, share it with the nation, and beyond the 100 days, put timeline to it, that this will be achieved by next month and the week after and the week after. You go much like when we had the COVID problem. Remember, the president used to have family discussion and say, this is what we're doing by next week, the week after, the week after. It requires that type of business timeline, on budget, on time, with people who account for their successes as well as their failures. That would be the type of focus that our new democratic coalition government would have to present to the nation.
Now, Dr. Abedian, as an observer, and obviously as an individual in business and with great expertise, are you happy that we are going to see a coalition government in which, for all intents and purposes, the various political parties will be looking over the shoulder of the next political party and hopefully ensuring that some of the levels of misconduct and corruption that we've seen in the past do not occur? Or do you suspect that we are going to have serious challenges in coming up with a sustainable or a stable coalition government?
I think, Hugo, I'm optimistic that South Africa's election results this year shows the diversity of our nation. There is nobody who can be arrogant enough any longer to say that we dominate, we know what's good for you, we have the backing of the majority of our nation. That no party can claim that, and that's a good thing. Which means in the political domain, in the language of economics, competition has become real. Which means parties have to focus and watch over their shoulders that if they do something bad, something unethical, they cannot cover it up. Hopefully in the coalition pact, there will be a very clear commitment to good governance and clean governance, and without trying to back each other up and cover up, then that's a good thing. Competition in the political arena means people will be more the center of service delivery, as opposed to individuals, their misbehavior and colluding together to cover for this president, for that minister, cover up that DG, etc., etc. So I think if we get it right, and I'm optimistic that we will get it right, competition in the political arena will serve the nation going better, and it will reflect the diversity in our nation, which is a reality. And that diversity needs to reflect itself in the cabinet, the diversity of ideas, diversity of preferences, and therefore help us form and evolve our democratic order to a people-centric as opposed to party-centric or individual-centric type of political order.
Dr. Abedian, something that's been topical in the last few months has been the issue around Cadre deployment. And John Steenhuisen said that if he was to lead the government, one of the things that he will write off or do away with is the issue of Cadre deployment for any political party. So let's bring in the MK party into the equation and the possibility of Cadre deployment. And potentially with it, the question that arises is just how much of its membership is qualified to run various portfolios in government. Is this something that would cause worry to investors, to business?
Absolutely, not just MK party, even DA and ANC have had disastrous data development history. When you replace quality and expertise, and you accept that people who are not competent are allowed to occupy ministerial or technical offices without knowing what to do, is like putting the 747 plane at the mercy of an incompetent pilot. We know what will happen. So, and we don't want that. We've paid a huge price as a result of employing incompetent people. I would like to remind you, Hugo, back in 1994 to 1999 and the first 10 years, we also had Cadre employment by the ANC. But look at the difference. Those Cadre deployments or employments or appointments were based on competence, commitment, ethical conduct. But when Cadre development becomes a platform for putting incompetent people in places so that they can steal public money, then we know what the result is going to be. So I think we need to unpack this appointment or Cadre development into two categories. Cadre development that is based on competence and capability, experience, ethical commitment is very different outcome than Cadre development that is political bullying and putting people who are incompetent in charge of very important positions that causes the nation a lot of money and causes a lot of harm and suffering to the poor in particular.
Can we expect changes in fiscal policy, particularly in areas such as maybe taxation and public spending?
Yep, as I mentioned, alluded to, we have a junk-graded sovereign risk, sovereign credit, if you like, which means national finances are not managed properly, which means our debt is getting out of control. Our debt service at the moment, public debt service, is not only high by global standards, by our own affordability standards, but also is the fastest growing item of government budget at the moment is servicing public debt, which means we are now in the same position, Hugo, technically, a little bit worse than what apartheid left behind, which means about 21 cents of every rand of government revenue goes towards servicing public debt. That not only is an unsustainable situation, but that is a contributor to the disparities of income in the nation, which we can least afford. So that needs to be brought under control. That means public finances need to be managed very, very differently. We cannot have ministers and a lot of bag carriers getting massive amount of salaries for delivering nothing. You know, I'm sure you know that the statistics that was published that about 38,000 public servants are getting more than R1 million per year. Now that is 38 billion rand. What do they produce? They must show productivity. They must show better services, better economy, better infrastructure. The result is not what you and I can see in the society. So the management of public finances has gone out of hand. And we can spend literally, not the full show, but maybe a few days to show that from the heart of the cabinet is too large, too fat, and too expensive for our economy. That has to be trimmed down, all the way down. This so-called ministerial handbook needs to be rewritten completely to be fit for a society and economy like ours. We cannot afford those type of squandering of our public resources. As a result, we get the basic services, be they health, be they roads, be they policing, be they education, be they water, etc., is not receiving resources because the money is squandered elsewhere. So we need to go back to basics, literally, rearrange our fiscal priorities, bring into it a lot of ethics, a lot of people who go there to serve, not to extract for themselves and for their cronies. That's where the political judgment begins, and I think coalition will help to focus the minds a little bit better than over the past 15 years.
Now, a group of individuals that will be looking to union buildings for some resolution to their challenges are the hundreds of thousands of young people that remain unemployed. Now, the argument is that governments don't employ people, but they facilitate or they create an environment that allows business to employ and create jobs. What are those conversations likely to sound like for this new government if they are to be able to create jobs?
I think we need to change the conversation. We need to not assume that government is irrelevant to job creation. Government and government policies are absolutely critical. About I would submit about possibly 1 million jobs have been lost because of incompetent people who've been running Transnet and ports and Eskom and all the other public enterprises. Now, that is a government decision. Those jobs are never mind created, they've been lost. We have had a job loss in order of about 3 million over the past decade because of dilly-dallying in doing the right policy changes, getting the investment into our infrastructure, getting the economy to be more stable, and. So the government can destroy jobs, can also create the environment for both public and private sector, but largely private sector generating jobs. When, for example, let's just break it down. When we have this fiasco at Home Affairs about visas, visitors' visas, how many ministers have come and gone, and 3 administrations that I can remember have not addressed this issue. That's a sector of tourism, which is one of the strengths of our economy, is the most labor-intensive, the most job-creating sector of our economy. Now, instead of giving priority to that, 15 years goes and the Department of Home Affairs still cannot sort out this visa issue, and it still prevents skilled people coming in. But then on the other hand, they say a lot of youth are unemployed, they don't have the skills. But how do you create the skills? Unless you bring the skills into the country, not the crooks and the corrupt, but competent people who want to come in to run businesses so that the youth can get opportunity to pick up skills, experience. So I think we need to change the discourse around what it takes to create jobs, what it takes to not just create, but also preserve jobs. Today, a lot of our industries have disappeared. All the mining smelters are no longer. Our steel industry is...
Dr. Abedian, I'm sorry, but we've run short of time. Obviously, you'll appreciate that with all that's happening around the election results, we have to go. Pan-African Investment and Research Chief Economist, Dr. Iraj Abedian, who was unpacking for us some of the expectations of the new government, which expected into office in the next couple of weeks.